guys, it's Dasha. Welcome back to my channel, and welcome to the first video in a series of 3 videos talking all about series. I thought it'd be good to kind of have like a comprehensive list on my channel of some series that I don't want to finish, some series that I want to finish really badly, and some series I want to start, because I've noticed that a lot of you guys really like talking in the comments with me about books and series. So I thought it'd be great to kind of have this comprehensive list, and we can all discuss in the comments whether some of them are worth finishing, whether some of them aren't worth finishing, and etc, etc. So today's video specifically will be about series I do not want to finish. Now these will be separated into categories, and the first of which is series that I could be persuaded to finish. I am very susceptible to peer pressure, and there's series that I didn't like hate and I kind of am still interested in, but I'm not like excited to complete them. So I definitely need your opinion on those. And the rest is just series that I definitely don't want to finish. Some of them are series where I DNF'd the first or second book in the series, so I definitely won't be finishing them. And then we'll finish off at the end with like a rapid fire round of some very popular like YA dystopian series from like the 2012 to 2015 era that like obviously I have no interest in finishing them. If you know me at all, you know I've kind of moved away from that YA category, so that will be at the end. Very rapid fire. So like I said, the first category is series that I am very evenly split on my decision, where I'm not sure I want to read them. I kind of do, but mostly don't. So the first of these is the Monstrous graphic novel series by Marjorie Liu and Sana Takeda. And this is a beautiful like Art Deco fantasy style graphic novel. I did not particularly connect to the first one, but I love the art style. The problem is like, because you're trying to build up this fantasy world, this big military and political plot line in a graphic novel, it's so much harder to get into it. So I'm really torn on this one, because I've heard that the rest of the series is just as beautifully illustrated and really exciting, but I just was so lost that it really put me off. Like the reading experience of this was not fun, despite the like visual experience being fantastic. So I'm really debating on this one. Next, I have 2 N.K. Jemisin series actually. So the first of these is the Inheritance trilogy. So I read the first book, The 100,000 Kingdoms. It's an adult fantasy about a woman who goes to the capital to kind of compete for her inheritance to the throne, but there's a bunch of like politics involved. This family has enslaved some gods. There's all sorts of interesting like power dynamics. I really did enjoy the first book, honestly. The reason I'm not sure I want to continue is that I've heard that the other 2 books follow different people within this world, which N.K. Jemisin kind of tends to do, and it's not my favorite thing, honestly. I feel like if I'm reading a trilogy, I really want to kind of see characters grow and develop. And the other thing too is like the events in this one wrapped up so neatly that I really feel like there's no need to continue. At the same time, I love N.K. Jemisin's writing style in this one specifically. I really did enjoy it. I found it fast-paced. I actually even enjoyed the romance in this. I found that it was really unique and just really breathtaking. So part of me really wants to just keep reading in this world, because I love all kind of fantasy with gods involved. But again, it wrapped up so neatly, I'm not sure if I really feel the need to continue. And the other one is a bit more controversial. I have the Broken Earth trilogy here, so 5th season, Obelisk Gate, and Stone Sky. As you can see, I own all of these because I thought I would read them. I thrifted them all and I was really proud of myself. So this is like an adult sci fantasy. It's set in this world that kind of comes apart by these massive like earthquakes and tremors, and people kind of have to learn to survive with this. You also have this really cool magic system where people can control the earth. Some people are just born with that ability, but they're kind of ostracized. So there's a lot of really interesting discussions in here, and I know that this series is absolutely beloved. I just didn't fall in love with it as much as everyone else did when I did read the first book, and then I tried reading Obelisk Gate and it just kind of didn't interest me at all. It felt like after all the interesting stuff that happened in here, this one just really took a weird pace and tone. I also gifted this entire series to my friend Ray. I'll link her channel down below as always. I love her so much, and she actually read through the whole series and she said all the books got progressively worse, and that's not the first time I've heard that opinion. So it just really mitigated my desire to read this at all. But I know how beloved it is. All 3 books have won a Hugo Award, which is like unheard of. So obviously there's some kind of merit to it. I just don't feel any desire to reach for these, and I'm thinking of actually just unhauling the whole series because I don't even know if I want to reread the 5th season ever. And I feel like I would have to reread it in order to like blow through the whole series. So that's another reason I'm like, do I really want to spend my time? Because this is like a complicated ass book. The writing in this is beautiful, but it is very complex and takes a lot of brain power. And I'm just, if I'm not like loving it, I'm not sure I want to continue. Another trilogy that I completely own because I thrifted it is the Shades of Magic series. So Darkest Shade of Magic, Gathering of Shadows, and Conjuring of Light, all by V.E. Schwab. This is an adult, kind of bordering on young adult for being honest, fantasy series set in this like world where there are 4 parallel Londons and very rare people can travel between all of them, and this one guy brings back an artifact from one of them that he's not supposed to. It used to be more of like a booktube darling, which is why I ended up picking it up when I was just kind of getting into booktube. And I found that the first book, A Darkest Shade of Magic, was just truly not that great. I just didn't really care that much. V.E. Schwab's characters never interest me, to be quite honest with you. I never find them that intriguing, but her premises are always pretty cool, and the worlds that she creates and her writing is honestly fantastic. So then I found the other 2 at Value Village, and I was like, oh, they're in great condition. Let me just pick these up. I might want to continue because I heard that like the people who love this series really love it and love the other 2 books. But every time I look at it, I feel no desire to continue. So I'm very torn. They are pretty quick books to get through. Like I never had an issue reading V.E. Schwab stuff. It's very compulsively readable. So it's not like it would be like a huge time commitment, but then again, I have a million other things I want to get to. The next one in this category is gonna be a bit of a shocker if you saw my most disappointing books of 2020 video. So Red Rising by Pierce Brown, the Red Rising saga. This is an adult like sci-fi dystopian almost, set on Mars. We're following a character who is mining the planet thinking that he's going to make it inhabitable for humans, but really he's just being exploited, as well as all of his cast. They're just being exploited for the upper classes, and he basically finds himself wrapped up in the middle of a revolution. I did not like this book. I hated the whole beginning, but there is a specific part about, I guess, halfway through where the setting abruptly changes and you get a lot more interesting characters. I just found Pierce Brown's writing so obnoxious. Like he clearly was told his whole life that he's like a great white man that can write, and he just ran with it, and like it's not that good. But I liked a lot of the ideas here with where the politics could head. To me, the politics in this world really read like a grown-up Ember in the Ashes type political system and universe, which I do quite enjoy. And I've heard that the second book does get a lot more political and a lot more intriguing and kind of goes away from this juvenile rebellion kind of plot line, which we kind of got at the beginning. So I would be very intrigued to pick it up, but remembering how I felt reading this really put me off. I have a bunch of tabs just like complaining about everything in this book. When I have the paper ones, that's when you know I don't really like the book. So I could still be persuaded to finish this though. Granted, I could possibly be persuaded to finish all of these because like I said, I'm very susceptible to peer pressure, but these specifically are the ones that really come to mind when I'm like, I want to, but I value my time. The next section is going to be very quick. It is just a couple of series where I DNF'd the first book, so obviously I won't be continuing. But once again, I could maybe be persuaded, who knows? The first of these is a really recent one. It is The Bear and the Nightingale by Catherine Arden, the first book of the Winter Night trilogy. I read this back in May, I think, and I got literally like 70 pages in maybe, and I was just not feeling it at all. I just really didn't care. It's a historical fantasy set in like medieval Russia in the woods, and there's some like folk spirits and that kind of stuff, which in theory I would like, but I was just not vibing with the writing style at all. And I know that a lot of people love this series, especially the second one takes place in Moscow and it's a lot more political, which is normally my thing, but I just couldn't get through the writing style of the first one, and I just never felt any desire to pick it up. So this is a series I will not be continuing, obviously. The second one of these is the Tower of Babel series by Josiah Bancroft. The first book was Senlin Ascends. I read it last June, I believe. And actually, I talk about it in my first wrap up on my channel. Wow, we've come a long way. This is a adult fantasy. It's a very like literary, almost absurdist fantasy. It is very odd. And you're following a man and a wife who are going on vacation near the Tower of Babel, which is this great mythical tower with all these levels that all have their own like ecosystems and political mechanisms and all this stuff within like the one tower. Main character loses his wife and has to go on this like massive quest to find her. I hated the main character. I did not jive with the writing style. I did find it very overwritten and definitely trying to go for that kind of literary fantasy, and it just did not work for me at all. This was a book I absolutely had no issues like DNFing. I'm like, listen, I'm not slogging through this. I'm never picking this back up. I did not like it, and I know the series has been getting a lot of like critical acclaim. The fourth book just came out recently, I think, and there's like a spin-off series with like the lore of the Sphinx or something. Not interested. His writing style is not for me. And the third one in this category, I actually DNF'd the second book in the series. So the first book is Wool by Hugh Howey. This is the Silo trilogy. And this is following this world where humans are living in this underground silo because the atmosphere on Earth is toxic. And so they live in this underground silo, but there's all sorts of like political things going on. They're trying to figure out if, you know, their government's lying to them and like what's really going on when people start mysteriously dying or vanishing or whatever. I enjoyed the first book enough. I feel like it was a really good transition for me as a reader of like young adult dystopian to adult books. It was a very good bridge in between. And if you saw my video recommending books, like if you didn't like this young adult, try this adult, I do recommend the first book and I think you might still enjoy the series. However, when I got to the second book, I ultimately got so bored. It was like twice the size of the first book. It was set before the events of the first book and kind of bouncing between a couple timelines, but the character you followed was just really irritating, had no personality, and I felt that getting where we were going was taking way too long. Took all these detours, but they weren't really necessary because I kind of guessed where it was all going anyways. And I made it to halfway through the book. I just put it down. I said, I cannot do this. I could be persuaded to pick it back up, but then again, I feel like there's so many better sci-fi series out there, and this one just kind of fell off for me. So after DNFing the second book, obviously, I will not be completing the third book. I'm done with it. The first book is fine. It still holds a fond spot in my memory because it wasn't bad, but the second book, I just could not stand, so the series is done for me. So the next category is just gonna be some series that I read one or two books from, and I just don't want to continue. This one I'm pretty firm in my decision of not continuing them. It would take a lot for me to change my mind. So the first two series are both by Sarah J Maas. It's Throne of Glass and ACOTAR. One of them is like a young adult series. One of them is kind of new adult. One of them follows an assassin who's gone in this like competition. I read Throne of Glass in June, I think. I will link the wrap up where I talk about it in case you want like full thoughts, but long story short, hated that book. And then I also read ACOTAR last year, a story about a fae world, a girl that kills a fae, so she's taken into the fae land to kind of live out a blood debt. It was fine. The beginning was good, and then it just kind of fell off for me. So long story short, I'm just not a fan of Miss Sarah J Maas. I do not think she is for me. However, I do have House of Earth and Blood. It was a gift from Ray, and I will be reading it for sure, just to kind of give it a go. It's her first marketed adult series, so maybe there will be a different tone, or maybe she has evolved as a writer. I don't like her as a person at all, but obviously this book is a gift and I'm going to read it, give it a try anyways. But yeah, Sarah J Maas books I just don't think are for me. I definitely don't want to slog through all of Throne of Glass. They are massive books like later on in the series, and there's a lot of them, and I just feel like I'm just gonna be rolling my eyes the whole time. Like, I tried it, I went into it with a somewhat open mind because I liked part of ACOTAR, but ultimately I'm not interested. The reason I don't want to continue A Court of Thorns and Roses, like that series, is because it's decidedly focused on romance, and that's not my thing. And I know there's a bit more political stuff going on, but I know that Sarah J Maas focuses a lot on her romances, and it's just not my ideal fantasy read. Literally both Throne of Glass and ACOTAR got 2 stars from me, so like I don't see any reason in continuing. I want to really quickly switch gears to a recent series that I decided to DNF, and that is The Ember Quartet by Sabit Tahir. So I read the first 2 books. I read this one in June, I think. I read Torch Against the Night in July. And then I started Reaper in the Gates in August, and I had to DNF it because I was just ultimately bored. It's a young adult fantasy series set in this like ancient Roman inspired military world, and it's very dark and brutal. I believe it's actually published in the UK as adult because it is so dark, but it definitely reads a bit more young adult because there's that focus on like romance and the plot moves so quickly. And ultimately with the third book, I just realized that the way that the first two wrapped up and set up stuff, I was okay with just ending it there. And then we got into a lot of the same problems. So these books always start with a ton of action, which I like, but then it just falls into a very repetitive pattern of characters that are supposed to be like the smartest and the best and the strongest doing really stupid things and uncharacteristic things, and it just drives me absolutely up the wall. And I just felt like if I'd continued it, I would resent it more, and I don't really want to leave the series like feeling negative about it. I didn't mind the first two books, so I definitely think that it's just better if I leave it behind, DNF it, and not sit through two more massive books, because like they read very quickly, but they're still like fairly chunky books. So I don't think it's a good idea to just kind of keep pushing myself through it if I'm not enjoying it anymore. The next series are actually like thriller horror mysteries. So the first one is Stillhouse Lake by Rachel Kane. This is an adult thriller series about a woman who comes home one day to find that there's like a car that crashed in her garage. And then when investigators are like seeing what happened, they realize that the garage was actually like a serial killer lair for her husband. So she takes the kids and starts a brand new life until the town that like she settles in that they really, really all like starts, you know, spitting out dead bodies. And while I didn't mind the first one, I felt that there's absolutely no need to continue this woman's story. Unless they're completely unrelated stories, either following like a central character, kind of like the Janet Ivanovich books or the Kathy Reichs books, or like books that follow like a central main character detective, something like that, that's fine. But I felt like in Stillhouse Lake, we actually got a fair amount of character like development and background, and it felt like a very well-rounded story to me, honestly, not gonna lie, because you got to see how the wife rebuilt after finding out that her husband was a serial killer. You got to see the ramifications of that on her, on the kids, what she does to protect her kids, how the internet had an effect on it. It's really interesting. And then there's just no need to continue it, so I'm gonna absolutely like, I have no desire to continue that one. I felt like the story wrapped up great, so that one's done. And then we also have The Shining by Stephen King. I found out that there is a second book in this series, and like, why? So The Shining is like a psychological horror, and it is about a small family that has to go winter in like a remote hotel because the father is a caretaker, and there's like all sorts of shit that starts happening, and I fucking loved it. I absolutely loved it. I thought it was a great book. I'll link the wrap up where I talk about it, but I just really, really fell in love with it. But finding out there was a second one, I'm like, why? Leave these poor people alone. They've been through enough, honestly. And I just feel like there's absolutely no need for a sequel, and I'm definitely not gonna read it. The last one I'm gonna talk about before I get into all of the young adult, like rapid fire ones, is Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. So this is an adult. It's kind of fantastical. It's a dark academia book set in like Yale. The main character can see ghosts, and she's in charge of just overseeing all these like secret magical societies in Yale. And I just did not gel with this book at all. As it is, I've read everything that Leigh Bardugo has published, and this was definitely just the hardest to get through. Her writing style is pretty decent, like I don't hate it, but this was definitely the hardest to get through because it was just very nonsensical, and it felt like it had no reason to be so discombobulated and all over the place. And I know there's going to be a sequel. There's like no date or title announced yet, but regardless, there is going to be a sequel. It's going to be a series following the main character, Alex Stern, but I just didn't care about anyone enough to want to continue it personally. I didn't like it enough. It ended up being a very disappointing book for me, and I see no reason in continuing to read about these characters. Okay, so last category is a bunch of rapid fire young adult. I'm not gonna get into like super minute details. All you need to know about this is that I didn't love the books, and so I will not be continuing them. I find them probably juvenile or just not great in my opinion, so I don't really want to continue them. Starting off with The Infernal Devices by Cassie Clare, a young adult shadow hunter fantasy set in like Victorian London. Just didn't care. I found the love triangle cringy. Will not be continuing. The System Divine series by Jessica Brody and Joanne Rendell, I think. First book was Sky Without Stars. This is like a YA sci-fi retelling of Les Mis set in space. Utterly forgettable. The Sherlock Holmes series by Brittany Cavallero, first book of which is, I don't even remember anymore because it was, again, very forgettable. It was following the descendants of Sherlock and Watson, but like in the US for some reason, and it was just like way too young for me, honestly. It would be better suited for like almost like a middle grade category, minus the murder, but like same with Truly Devious by Maureen Johnson. I know she just released a fucking 4th book in that series that's like not related to the main trilogy. Listen, if you need to stretch a mystery out for 3 books, you better make it entertaining, and this was just not. I actually read 2 books in this series and was just like over it. If you've been on my channel since last year, the Mara Dyer series by Michelle Hodkin. This is terrible. These are rage tabs. I complain a lot about this book. I'd filmed a full dedicated review to like how much I hate this, but I lost the footage. I'm debating if I still want to do it or if I just want to like get rid of this demon haunting my bookshelves. It's a paranormal romance, and it's just really fucking cringy and should not be sold to teenage girls because it's just extremely unsavory and inappropriate. The Legend series by Marie Lu. So I've read the first 2. I owned all 3 of them. If you saw my unhaul, I got rid of them. I read, yeah, Legend and Prodigy, and I picked up Champion a few years later, and I reread the first 2 books. It's a YA like dystopian set in like Los Angeles. Truly, we did not need that 3rd book. It could have wrapped up after the first 2, which is why I never got around to reading the 3rd one. Now there's gonna be like a 4th one released, and I'm just not interested anymore. I'm over it. We got the Maze Runner series by James Dashner, young adult dystopian, post-apocalyptic again. I've read the first 3 like over and over and over in high school. I used to quite like them, and then I picked up the 0.5, I guess, in a thrift store a couple years ago, and then I just realized that I don't care. I feel like the trilogy is fine on its own. I don't need to read like a prequel. Also, James Dashner has sexual assault allegations against him, and I'm not cool with that, so I will actually just be completely unhauling these anyways. Oh my god, this is like, these are older ones. Infinity by Sherilyn Kenyon. This was like a YA zombie series. Honestly, this one too could have been better suited as middle grade because the writing style was very Percy Jackson-esque, which isn't a bad thing, but I just expected more. I didn't really like this at all. Hush Hush by Becca Fitzpatrick was also fucking terrible. It was like a fallen angel paranormal romance, but it was just cringy and convoluted and completely not that good. Same in that like kind of shitty category, the Match series by Ali Condi. This was just nonsense. This was like a dystopian where you like matched with your future partner, but of course the girl is like stuck between 2 guys, and it's just like, that's when we needed to bury the YA dystopian trend, truly. And then the final 2, I have The Gilded Wolves by Roshani Chokshi. I know that there is a sequel that is out and then a 3rd one that's coming, I think. And it's a young adult, like almost steampunk fantasy, a historical fantasy set in like 1860s Paris or something. I didn't hate the first book. I just found it a little bit underwhelming. The characters were great and the atmosphere was great, but I didn't really jive with it that much, so I don't really want to continue. And similarly, The Merciful Crow by Margaret Owen. The 2nd book is out. I believe it is just a duology, and this is a world where like there's a plague and you follow the main character who's part of the Crow cast, and they're the only ones that are immune to the plague, so they go into towns and like pick up the dead bodies because they can't get infected. And there's like an interesting kind of magic and an interesting political plot, but I truly have no desire to continue this series unless someone tells me that like the 2nd book is way better than the first one. I just don't really care anymore. It's been a while since I read the first one, and I'm okay to just leave it at that. Whew, that is it. That was my whole list of series at this point in time that I won't be continuing. Let me know if, again, some of these are worth continuing, if you continued on, think you like them. I'm not a big believer in you need to read like 2-3 books before it gets good. Like, you should grip me with the first one, but I can be persuaded, especially with that first section of books. Keep an eye out for my other 2 videos coming after this one with series that I would really like to continue and series that I want to start. My social media is going to be linked down below. You guys can always come talk to me there and in the comments, of course. Other than that, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!